Okay, we're going to do a little bit of factoring review. The next section of our unit is solving quadratic equations, and the first method we'll be looking at is solving things by factoring. So before we do that, let's just make sure we remember how to factor. So we're going to look at some basic trinomials to start with. So if we have a trinomial like any of these examples that I've got written on here, we have three terms. If we remember back, let's kind of look at an example from last year that you would have done. If you multiply x plus 3 times x plus 1, and you FOIL those out, you'd have x times x would be x squared, x times 1 would be 1x, 3 times x would be 3x, 3 times 1 would be 3. So you can see we get a question like that, and you can see these two middle ones we could add together to give you 4x. So when we multiply, we go from the factored version to the answer. So now when we factor, we're just going to start with that and go backwards. So the trick is, you want to figure out what two numbers add up to the middle one. Because you can see here, the two middle ones, we added them together to give you 4. But then you can see those same two numbers multiply together to give you the last thing. We went 3 times 1, and that gave us the 3. So with any of these questions, that's basically the trick. You want to figure out what times what gives you the last two numbers, but they also have to add up to the middle one. So in this case, 3 times 1 multiplies to give you 3. 1 plus 3 adds up to give you 4. So we can write our answers as x plus 1 and x plus 3. So that would be our two factors for that first one. Okay, let's do the same thing with the second one. So in this case, we want a sum of -5 and a product of 6. Always start with the product, so figure out those two numbers first. So 6 would be 3 times 2. That gives us 6. But we want them to add up to -5. So we have to think, okay, well, they could be a -3 and a -2. That also multiplies to give you +6. And in this case, those will add up to -5, so that's good. So those are our two factors, x minus 3 and x minus 2. And we're done with that one. Okay, let's do the same thing for the next one. A sum of 6 and a product of -16. So you want to ask yourself, what times what gives you 16? So it could be 16 and 1. Those aren't going to add up to 6. It could be 8 and 2. Right? 8 times 2 is 16. That's good. They got to be -16 though, so that means one of them has to be positive, one has to be negative. And if you look at the sum, we want them to add up to 6. So that means we want +8 and -2. That'll add up to 6, but multiply to give you -16. So our two factors are +8 and -2. And the last one, we got -4 and a product of -12. So do the same thing. What times what would that multiply give you 12? 12 and 1, that doesn't work. 3 and 4, that's not going to add up to 4, so it's going to be 6 and 2. One of them is going to have to be negative to give you a -12 product, and we want a sum of -4, so that means we want the middle one to be -6 and +2. So x minus 6, x plus 2. Okay, so that's it for the basic factoring. Let's look at some now that are a little bit harder. Okay, we'll do a couple more here. These are a little bit different. You can see the problem with them is we get this number in front. We have a 2 out front, which we can't factor with it like that. So in this case, what we want to do is we want to take out that 2. So we're going to divide everything by 2. We're going to take out a common factor of 2. So then now you can see the question becomes x squared minus 8x plus 15. So now we can do this one. We'd have a sum of -8, a product of 15. So our two numbers will be 5 and 3, but we need them to be -8, so they both have to be negative. So our factors will be 2 times x minus 5 and x minus 3. So just divide by 2, and then after that the question becomes the same. So we'll do the same thing for the second one, divide it by 3. So we'd have x squared plus 1x minus 6. So now our sum will be 1, product of -6. So we want 3 and 2. One of them has to be negative, so +3 and -2 should work. So we'll get x plus 3 and x minus 2. So those ones work. If you happen to get a question, let's suppose I gave you one like this. We have a number in front, like 4, but we can't divide it because 5 doesn't divide by 4, 8 doesn't divide it by 4. So what we're going to do is we're not going to factor it. If it works out to it's a tough one like that, we'll just say it can't be factored, and that'll be it. We're going to look at a different method to solve those kind. One other type we got to be able to do is what happens if we have terms missing. So if I give you a question like something like that, x squared plus 2x equals 0. Actually, we don't need to do the equals 0 part. So just x squared plus 2x. You can see we don't have the last number. We don't have the product number. So you can still do that. You can see in this case we'd have a sum of 2, but now our product would be 0 because there is no last number on there. So do a product of 0. So your two factors will be 2 and 0. 2 plus 0 is 2. 2 times 0 is 0. So your factors then will be x plus 2 times x plus 0. And you don't really need to write the 0 in there. You can just write it as 2 plus x and just the x by itself. That's also the same. And you can even write that with the x in front. So any of those three, those are all the exact same form. So if you get a missing term at the end, put it as a 0. You can still do the question. And let's do one more. If I give you a 0 in the middle, so we call this one a difference of squares because now our sum is 0 and our product is negative 4. So we'd have to have 2 and 2 to give us 4. One has to be a plus, one has to be a negative to give you 0. So your two factors are x plus 2 and x minus 2. When we're dealing with difference of squares like that, let's do one more. So if I gave you a harder one, so let's suppose it was 25. So we'd have a sum of 0, product of 25, so that would be 5 and 5. One of them will be a plus, one of them will be a minus. So a shortcut way that some people do these is they just square root each term. So square root of x squared is x, square root of 25 is 5. So you can do it that way and kind of do it that way. And if you do a question, let's do one more, where you have a number in front, let's not do 16, let's do 4x squared, and we'll do minus 9. So you can see we got a 4 in front. We can't divide out the 4. We can't really factor it, but we can use this square rooting idea. So we could square root both sides, and that'll just give us a final answer of 2x plus 3 and 2x minus 3. And that's it.